So, what if I have to go to a shelter? Sometimes the best thing for you to do is to get out of that tough relationship and go to a shelter. So, how exactly does that work? Let's talk about that. Welcome to Resilience This Week, the weekly show that helps you become a more resilient person. This week, we are diving into the practicalities of when, how, and what it's like to go to a shelter when you're escaping a tough relationship. This is something that some people think about, but they're afraid of, so they stop thinking about it. So I hope you'll join us for the entire show. I'm Stacy Brookman, life storytelling and resilience expert and host of the Real Life Resilience podcast and the Emotional Abuse Recovery and Resilience Summit. Someone you know might need that. Here's the question of the day. Have you ever had to go to a shelter? Or have you ever had to go and stay with family or friends to escape a tough relationship situation? I've had to. It felt very awkward to me, but it was necessary for my safety. So I'd love to know if you've had that experience, or if you've thought about it, actually gone to a shelter, or if you've ever had to stay with friends or family for your safety. Make sure and put the comments down below. If you feel comfortable, even share what you think. Share your tips and tricks that will help make this an easier transition for somebody. Or if you know of someone who's been to a shelter and maybe you've helped them. So what if you need to go to a shelter? I spoke in an earlier video about when is it time to leave. And now we're preparing for that strategy, just in case that needs to happen, if and when. You just want to be informed in case you need to, and here's why. You really want to leave safely. Sometimes that point of actually leaving can be really dangerous. You may be ultra nervous, and that's perfectly normal. And if the other person, your partner, finds out, that can be scary. But in fact, what's normal for everyone is different, and because every situation is totally different. Let me just say here too, that going to a shelter can be for anyone who needs it. It can be low, middle, or high income. It can be all types of people. In fact, there are some men's shelters as well. So don't worry that you have a steady job or you make too much money or whatever. They don't ask your income. That is not a factor in whether they take you or not, or whether you need a shelter or not. I interviewed Amber Mitchell from the National Domestic Violence Hotline a while back, and I picked her brain about the nuts and bolts about going to a shelter so that I could bring this to you and actually give you some information way before you need it. We had a great conversation about it, and I shared my experience as well. So first, here's what you need to do to prepare. First, open a separate bank account to have a little bit of money set aside. Look into your legal options. Know what your rights are with regard to your kids, getting copies of emergency documents, building a support system. So we talked about all of these in a previous video, so go back and watch that. That's a lot to take in. But part of that is making sure your support people understand your emergency plan as well. Often when people are leaving a partner, they're in a hurry and they need to move very, very quickly. And we want you to be able to do that and with safety. So having an idea of what your options are is really important. Where is the nearest police station? What's the number to the nearest shelter? And having those can give you peace of mind. So let's talk about the power dynamics in your relationship. One thing you should consider are the patterns your partner has. You need to take into consideration what kinds of threats do they usually say? Are they preventing you from leaving the home? Are they holding finances over you? Things like that can actually prevent you from leaving when you really, really need to for your own safety. That's mental safety as well as physical safety. It's often helpful to write down a list and say, I'm scared that my partner might do this, or I'm concerned about where I would stay, or what could happen with that. Then filling in some of those blanks for you, just getting those worries out on paper, filling in some of those blanks. Often, partners may take away access to phone or your transportation. So one big safety tip is to have maybe one of those cheap flip phones, pay as you go, hidden in a closet, or a spare copy of your car key that you could hide somewhere in case you need to run out and not bring anything else with you. Perhaps you want to leave an emergency bag of clothes and some cash with your support person, along with the ID documents that we mentioned before. So the shelters themselves, there are actually thousands and thousands of shelters nationwide. They're all a little bit different, and they're all over the place. So the national hotline might be a great place to start. They have phone operators there available 24/7. They're going to do a screening with you and ask you some questions like, what's your family size? What's happening in your situation? And they'll assess a little bit about your safety and see if it's a good fit and if they have availability for your family. Because if you have kids, I mean, they want to make sure that there's plenty of room for them as well as yourself. So you can also just call 911 and they will transfer you to a shelter or give you the number for a shelter. Okay? The main thing is to reach out. 911 is also a great number if your partner is preventing you from leaving and you need help just getting out of the home. That's a severe situation and you need to call 911. If you know you're leaving ahead of time, you can call the shelter and just ask questions of them so you're in the know. Ask if they take pets. Some of them do. Let them know how many kids you have and their ages. Ask about their intake processes. Also, some people are afraid that Child Protective Services will get involved. That's typically not the case unless there's indication of physical abuse. So don't be worried that your kids might be taken from you. Taking your kids to a shelter means you're trying to protect them and you, and that's a good thing. So be aware of that. Anyway, let's get back to the questions. This was the most uncomfortable part for me. When I had to go to a shelter, I wasn't prepared. I called them initially, I got the number, and they were asking questions that I hadn't had to verbalize yet. Again, they are just assessing the situation and they need to know. So even though it's uncomfortable, to help yourself, you really need to answer those questions. So often we tend to brush off everything as, okay, it's okay, or it's not that bad, but this isn't the time to minimize what's happened. They're going to ask you what type of abuse, physical, mental, emotional, verbal. If there's been a recent incident, you're going to have to describe it to them. And it gives them a little bit more context on what's happened. Again, it's very uncomfortable, but if you practice this, write some of these things down, you'll be ready for it. And it's for your own good. They're going to ask about firearms if you have them in the house. If your partner has access to them, they need to know that. Has there been police involvement or restraining orders before? Don't be embarrassed if your answer is no or if your answer is yes. Simply answer the questions that they ask. So, how do you actually get to a shelter? Sometimes the shelter will meet you at a location like a police department or a nearby McDonald's. You need to get out of the house and get to somewhere else. They'll pick you up from there, or maybe sometimes they'll send a cab to get you. They don't normally come to your residence because that would be unsafe for them. They don't know what that situation is like, and they want to make sure that they are safe and the people who are couriers are safe. Some of them might tell you their address if you have your own car to get there. That's what happened to me. After the intake, then they felt safe enough to give me their address. They're very private about their addresses, as you can imagine. So honor their rules about that. Often they have codes to get in, and many have 24-hour staff, so there's always someone around. And many times, these places look just like regular residences in a neighborhood. It's a regular house, and they're using it as a safe house. So once you get there, there's usually some intake paperwork that you have to go through. And that's, again, where you may have to talk about what's happened. Explain what kind of help you need. Maybe you don't know, and maybe just tell them, I don't know what kind of help I need. They're going to ask if you have a lawyer, if you have a counselor, if you need physical help, etc. Do you need a restraining order? This is important. Monetary help, counseling. They are there to listen to you and help you with your emotional well-being and your safety. Now, they won't provide an attorney or anything like that, but they are very connected with the local resources and can be an advocate so you can get the help you really need. I love this part because they know they need to connect you with resources to help you be safe and get back on your feet. Now, they'll definitely ask about any violence you've experienced, and you have the right not to share. But the more you do, the more they can help you. Again, very uncomfortable verbalizing everything you've experienced, but it's in your own interest. You may not have ever verbalized this before. And that's where, again, writing everything out helps you. Often it's going to be asked in a very matter-of-fact manner. Tell me this or tell me that. And it seems like it's rather bizarre. But just bear with it because you've come this far. Don't get scared and leave. You're helping yourself. Just push through and get the services you need at the time. These folks really, really do want to help. And a lot of times they've been in your shoes. They've been to that shelter or a shelter before. They're going to give you things like toothbrush, toothpaste, deodorant, other normal toiletry items. They're going to give you a tour of the home and explain some of the house rules. They'll also let you know typically how long you're able to stay. Some safe houses can handle just a few days or a few weeks. They may be able to connect you with a resource where you can stay a month or maybe even 3 months. Each shelter really varies on the resources available. So getting that knowledge ahead of time can be very, very helpful. Okay, so I've given you a lot to think about. This is great information because even if you don't necessarily need it, you might know of someone who will need it in the future, and you're going to be able to give that to them. Let me give you the number for the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Again, these are amazing, amazing people. Often they've been in situations before themselves. It's at thehotline.org, thehotline.org, and it's 1-800-799-7233. That's 1-800-799-7233. They have a wealth of information on their website and really do help you before, during, and after you've gone to a shelter. Even if you don't go to a shelter, but you go to a friend or a family member's home, they will help. They have financial resources, counseling resources, getting back on your feet, rebuilding your life. And speaking of that, sometimes you may be lucky enough to have a good support system and somebody with whom you can stay, a friend or a family member. Now, although they won't have an intake form like a shelter, it's best to have some really open and honest communication about how long you can stay and what their house rules are as well. You can also ask for the help you need. Don't shy away from asking. I always think of it like this. If someone were to ask me to help in some way, of course I would. If someone were to ask you for help in some way, you would help them. So get over your embarrassment to ask for help in getting on your feet. Just get over it. You need some help. You get that help. Okay, so today was a deep dive into going into a shelter. It's uncomfortable, but sometimes it's necessary for your mental and physical health. I hope it gave you some insight into how to do it and how to be prepared. This kind of information is the type that you want to have handy because, again, it may be you that needs it, but it may also be a friend. All right, don't forget the question of the day. I would love to know if you've thought about or actually gone to a shelter, or if you've ever had to stay with friends or family members for your safety. Comment below if you feel comfortable, or give some additional tips and tricks for some folks other people who might be going, and recommendations if you have them. Oh, I also have a deeper dive video that I'd like to share with you. It's that one I mentioned above. It's called When It's Time, How to Go to a Shelter. It's the interview with Amber Mitchell of the National Domestic Violence Hotline. I'll be sharing that for free for 72 hours after this video, Resilience This Week video airs, and you'll find the link below. So that concludes this week. I really, really appreciate all of my fans. Thank you so much for watching, for sharing this, because the more you share, the more people who might need this particular video will be able to see it, right? I will catch you next week on Resilience This Week. We're going to have another episode and some more valuable information. Bye for now. My name is Stacy Brookman. Women leverage me to unleash their stories and discover their hard-won wisdom so they can command their personal power and emerge resilient and joyful. Because so many are trapped in a cycle of crazy, depleted emotionally, and live with the scars of emotional abuse and low self-esteem. I help them gain clarity from their life lessons, lean on their hard-won wisdom, and have power to feel confident in themselves again. Will you join me? Click here to do so.